Hello, it's Martha Hopkins, aka Mrs. Hopkins 73, and this is Echo on the Beach, a recap podcast of Echo Beach episodes. This is episode 3. I'm calling it Reverse Psychology. We start with Jimmy surfing. He's on his belly, going far out on the waves. Susan is walking on the dry part of the beach, looking towards Dan's cafe. She spots Dan and his kids taking a group selfie. She smiles at their obvious happiness, and there isn't 1 ounce of jealousy in her bones. Abby cuts the opening day ribbon across the entrance door. Dan spots Susan looking at him, and they keep good eye contact. Susan drops her gaze first to walk away. Dan goes in, looks at Bray's homemade poster, and points out there's no apostrophe in the word surfboards. Bray claims grammar isn't that important to surfers. Ivy comes in, so she's the first customer. Abby hears Dan offer Ivy a wetsuit or boogie board and is holding in her laughter. Ivy says they seem cheerful. Dan says, "That's the trouble with us Merricks. We never know when we're beaten." Ivy is obviously the village gossip, and she attempts to give them a sincere congratulations for the shop, cafe, but it sounds so bitter. Charlie comes in next, and Abby shows him around, grabbing a pair of board shorts and putting them to his waist. Charlie tells Abby he had a dream about rabbits, but what could that mean in dream interpretation? I don't know. Abby gives Charlie a flyer for the cafe opening party tomorrow night. Mark is on the phone to his colleague, Jeff, but by the way he's talking, it could be anyone. Until he makes it more obvious that it's someone he's using to cause Dan trouble. Susan asks, "Who was that?" Mark says, "Nothing for you to worry about." But Susan did hear him say, make it a more attractive proposition for him to leave rather than to stay. She says, "You were talking about Daniel, weren't you?" Mark replies, "Is this how it's going to be now? Every conversation we have is supposed to be about him?" Susan says, "No, I just don't want you to lie to me, that's all." Mark says he's been telling lies for so long, it's second nature. He thinks for a second and manages to put a guilt trip on Susan, saying, "For the record, that was Jeff." He rattles on about real estate, then adds, "And while you were defending Golden Boy, I'm still trying to keep a roof over our heads." Jimmy has half his wetsuit on, leaning over and grabbing a t-shirt out of his backpack. Jackie notices his sunburn and says, "Ouch! Did you get hit by a whale?" Jimmy says, "It feels like it." Charlie comes in and slaps Jimmy right on his back. Ouch! Charlie asks Jimmy for advice on wooing Abby. Jimmy goes down the checklist of the signs, like flirting, jokes. Charlie grabs a pen and writes notes on his hand. Jimmy says, "Take it easy. Don't rush it. See what happens." Charlie insists not to, that he wants a foolproof plan. Abby and Narinda are having a girl chat in Ivy's bar. Narinda won't cave on her crush's identity. She says, "I know he likes me, just as a friend." Abby tries to pry as to who it could be. Narinda says, "No way, I will look like an idiot if he turns me down." Abby keeps harping on. "Just ask him, or if you're not sure, ask someone else to go to the party." Abby is clearly into mind games. She suggests, "See if it gets him jealous." Narinda gives her a look like, "What you talking about, Willis?" Then Abby says, "Maybe I should do that." Then ponders on that plan. Jimmy is still giving Charlie advice. Compliment her and study her reaction. He suggests, "You should just go up and kiss her. Just walk right up to her and kiss her." Charlie says he's going to go with the cowardly plan now. Jackie notices that Ian is stressed out. He claims it's work that's stressing him out. He says they're still rats in a different rat race. The Mark and Finn thing is heavy on his mind. Abby notices Jimmy broke his fin on his surfboard. Jimmy says, "Observant, you city people, aren't you?" Abby starts flirting. Says, "Well, there's not much worth looking around here, but it makes it easy to notice things that are." Then reveals their cafe opens tomorrow night. Is he going to come? Jimmy says he might. Abby's eyes start twinkling and she says she'll see him there then. And says as Jimmy's walking away, maybe you should let my dad fix your board. We can hang out while you wait. Jimmy looks charmed and smiles at her. Abby goes stronger. I promise I won't bite. Unless, of course, we decide we want that. Abby gives Jimmy a coy grin. Jimmy sees Charlie approaching Abby from behind, who's oblivious, and Jimmy tells her something like, does that work in London? Abby asks, what? Jimmy gets defensive and goes from flirting to argumentative in 0 to 60. He accuses her of throwing herself at him. Abby sounds taken aback and calls him a Cornish ass. Jimmy makes sure that Charlie hears him, saying she's just drumming up business for her old man. Abby walks off in sad disbelief, and Charlie tries a stupid line, but she ignores him. Charlie asks, what just happened? Jimmy says they had an argument, but he makes it clear he wasn't hitting on her. Charlie is confused, so what else is new? Grace goes to Ian's cafe and asks what he thinks of her new swimsuit. Ian stares blankly at her. She invites him to a private swimming cave. Ian grabs his key and leaves her there in the cafe. She looks delighted that she made him uncomfortable. Abby storms into the new surf cafe, yelling, it's a stupid town full of stupid people, and they were stupid for coming there. Dan asks, what happened? Abby says, you and that family. It was like 1,000,000 years ago. Then cuts him off there, and Dan's clueless as to why she's upset. Dan then hears a ruckus outside again. He runs out, and someone had started a fire in his VW van. Charlie is upset at Jimmy for arguing with Abby. He says, she's going to think I'm a dick because you're one. Jimmy explains that Charlie has the ball in his court because he gets to apologize to her for what an idiot he is. Go be a sympathetic shoulder to cry on. Charlie says he's off to start Operation Shoulder. In Ivy's bar, Finn is telling Ian not to worry about Mark. He's a shark. That rhymed. Ian says he's sorry. Finn basically says Mark isn't shit. He's seen bigger and better. Dan stops by to see Mark to warn him to officially stop with the pranks. Mark doesn't back down. Dan says back off. His kids could have been there and gotten hurt. Mark asks Dan if he is threatening him. Are you threatening me? That part just cracked me up. No matter what, it was, yeah. Mark gives him his ugly, evil grin. He tells Dan, just go. Nobody wants you here. Dan says, I'm not going anywhere. Mark says, okay, don't say I didn't warn you. Like you said, your kids could be in there next time. Dan turns into Daddy Bear and slams Mark into his dining room wall. They push each other and start to go into the boat accident details. Dan claims Mark was the only other person with the key to the workshop, so he probably trashed it and maybe took a sledgehammer to the boat engine. Mark is an asshole and points out that Dan let everyone point fingers at himself and took the rap for him. Dan threatens to tell the town the real story if Mark doesn't leave Dan and his family alone. Ivy serves Susan a regular orange juice. Ivy is the biggest town gossip, so she informs Susan that Dan's cafe is now open. Susan doesn't indulge Ivy and just pays for her juice. Angela spots Susan and shouts out to her, reminding her that they met the other day, remember? Susan remembers and sees Angela writing in a small notebook. Angela says it's chapter 10. Susan asks if it's a novel. Angela says, romance, and points out that Susan is drinking OJ. She's not drowning her sorrows then. Susan senses a strange vibe from Angela. Angela asks her to join her, so Susan perks up and sits down willingly. Angela claims Ivy's been filling her in on her colorful past, which doesn't sound off to Susan's ears. Angela tries to pry about Susan's feelings about Dan. Susan just responds with, it's messy. Angela then puts out her feelers about what her husband's attitude is towards it all. Angela keeps plugging away. Must be curious, though, thinking of what might have been. Susan shrugs and says, "He's got a good life." Angela is over-analyzing her statement. Usually people say, "I'm happy." Susan says, "I am." Angela smiles and says, "Well, good. Your husband's got nothing to worry about, has he?" Susan looks flabbergasted at Angela with her reverse psychology. It looked like a fly on the wall, sort of like an interview. A car insurance agent just left Dan's cafe, and a little good news comes their way. A new family car will be coming soon. Jackie comes in, concerned about the car fire. Ray convinces Jackie to take the job he and his dad offered her. Ray expresses he's very happy she accepted. Charlie pops in, and Orinda tries to gather her courage to ask him out. He asks for Abby, tries to change the subject. She tries to blurt something out to him, but he's dead set on asking Abby. Charlie apologizes to Abby for Jimmy's rudeness, explaining that the heat of the sun fries his brain and better judgment. Abby asks Charlie to be her date for the party. Miranda is eavesdropping and her head snaps back towards them to be in a better earshot. Charlie is a goofball and pinches himself. Charlie, oh, he's so funny. Jackie surprises Ian with a beach buggy rental. They hop in and ride down the beach. Back at Ivy's bar, Susan says she feels like she talked Angela's ear off. Dan goes in, but doesn't see her because the bar is very dark. He went in to pick up a couple of cases of champagne for the party. Angela notices Susan's discomfort and asks, "Is that him?" Susan looks nervous, and Angela says, "The eyes never lie." Susan gets up and starts making a beeline for the door, but in comes Mark. She tries to distract him, saying she was going to call him earlier. They can grab some Chinese for lunch. They head for the door, but not before Mark spots Dan sitting at the bar. Mark says, "Look who's here. Let's go say hi." Susan tries to persuade him not to, but Mark insists. Mark starts insulting Dan. Dan calls Mark a cruel bastard. Mark then turns to Susan and asks, "Am I, Suze? Am I cruel?" Susan, with sadness in her eyes, says, "No, he's not, and I'm going." Just then, Mark grabs Susan's arm with a vicious look on his face. Dan jumps up and says, "Let go of her." Susan says, "Dan, don't." Mark says, "Aw, isn't this sweet? He wants to defend you. Guess you were in love once, right? You two loved each other." Dan looks visibly hurt. Mark continues, "Didn't you, Susan? Didn't you love him?" Susan lies and says, "No, I didn't love him. I never did." Dan looks devastated. Mark says, "We should all get together more often. It's been fun." Then he leads the humiliated Susan out of the bar, leaving Dan in a daze. Dan heads back to his cafe with the champagne. He passes a sign for the bar that reads, "The Wrecker's Arms." That is the name of the pub. Jimmy is on his bed reading texts when Charlie busts in, boasting about Abby asking him out, which makes Jimmy change his mind about confessing to Charlie about being into Abby himself. Abby is bragging to Bray about her playlist of music for the party. The kids tease Dan after he says they could do better party planning without him. Dan wants them to celebrate their family bond with the first champagne popped open and a card game. The sun is going down, and Susan's sitting on her bed in her bathrobe. All the lights are off, and she looks pretty depressed. Mark comes in and tries to comfort her, but she pulls away and says, "Don't, just don't." She runs into her walk-in closet to change. Dan and his kids toast to their mum. Susan goes to the living room to grab her keys. She glances up and around the room, and it seems she's trying to understand Mark's reasoning for his actions. Dan is feeling a little better, but you can feel he is anticipating seeing Susan again. Mark is still up in the bedroom, looking like he's confronting his guilty conscience. It's past sunset, right at dusk, and Susan is walking briskly on the beach. She beelines it to a cove and starts crying. She places her hands on a corner covered by cement. She weeps loudly and strokes the sand with her fingers. It appears there's a secret grave there. That's the end of episode 3. Wow, love triangles were showing strong here. And a few secondary characters were in the background, but sure kept their manipulative wheels turning. So that was the 3rd episode of Echo on the Beach, a recap podcast of Echo Beach episodes. Join me next time. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell for more beach goodness. Bye!